Forbidden Love, a 77-year-old woman and a much younger 25-year-old man. The hidden truth. At the center of it all, like a spider in its web, is Genevieve Reed, 77, the empress of the Manhattan art world, widow of a tycoon who left her Rothko paintings in a loneliness that not even millions can fill. Tonight, something is different. A shiver runs down her spine. Across the room, he appears. Leo Vance, 25, a young curator who shouldn't be there. His jacket is wrinkled as if he'd run through the damp streets to get there, but it's the brooch on his lapel that freezes Genevieve. A small gold griffin, identical to the one her late husband wore. Leo's blue eyes, cold as ice, lock with hers. It's no ordinary desire, it's something more dangerous, a hunger that seems to know her history. He leans closer, his voice husky. Mrs. Reed, the way you look at that Monet, it's like you're repainting it with memories no one else sees. The compliment is a poisoned arrow. At 77, she knows what this flirtation means. A social taboo, a scandal for page 6. He leans in, handing her a catalog, and his fingers brush hers. An accidental contact that wasn't accidental. His warm, weather-beaten skin against hers sends a jolt she attributes to the air conditioning. The real auction begins there, between a 77-year-old woman and a 25-year-old man, separated by half a century, but united by something that smells of danger. The cafe she chose overlooked Central Park. The air was crisp with New York's autumn, and golden leaves fell outside, oblivious to the drama unfolding within. Genevieve sat, a fortress of elegance, but inside, the walls of her vast solitude were cracking. At 77, she was a queen in exile, with millions in paintings and an apartment in the Marais, but treated by her daughters as a relic to be preserved, not as a living woman. Across the marble table, Leo Vance leaned in, his smile a dangerous mix of youthful charisma and predatory calculation. He wasted no time. Genevieve, he began, his voice smooth as velvet, your paintings in the vaults, they are not just art, they are pieces of soul that time forgot to erase. She laughed. It was a fragile, brittle sound she hadn't used in years. The compliment was obvious, a clear tactic, but the desperate hunger to be seen was stronger. She was used to ruthless collectors, not this kind of challenge. And then, for the first time in decades, she gave in. Not to his touch, not yet, but to the temptation to confess. At 77, Leo, I am a dusty painting in my own gallery, she said, her voice low as if in a confessional. She spoke of her late husband, the tycoon, who collected her like one of his degas, displaying her at parties and galas, but ignoring her on the long, empty nights. The vulnerability escaped her, naked and raw, and Leo welcomed it in impassive silence. He listened with a stillness that was almost eerie. He didn't offer cheap sympathy. Instead, he leaned in even closer, closing the physical and moral space between them, making the air thin. Maybe I understand what it's like to be invisible, he murmured, and his ice-cold blue eyes locked with hers, as if he could read the secrets she had buried with her husband. And then, he crossed the final frontier. He reached across the table and took her hand. The contact was a living taboo. His hand, warm, strong, pulsing with the energy of his 25 years, enveloped hers, marked by blue veins and the thin skin of time. It was an electric shock. Genevieve recoiled instinctively, a sharp shock of social transgression. A scandal murmured in the air of the chic restaurant. But she didn't pull her hand away completely. She was horrified with herself and at the same time desperately fascinated. The feel of his warm skin was an addictive poison, a promise. Seeing her hesitation, the mix of fear and desire in her eyes, Leo revealed his own fabricated wound. It was the master key to his confidence. I grew up in foster homes, Genevieve, he said, his voice now tinged with a perfectly calibrated vulnerability, the scar on his temple seeming to glow softly. My foster father was a forger. He taught me to steal identities, not paintings. My whole life is a gallery of lies. He squeezed her hand. But you. He looked at her as if she were the only real thing in the room. You're the first living work of art I've ever touched. The kiss didn't happen there, in plain sight. It happened later that week, in the darkness of an Egyptian wing of the Metropolitan Museum of Art. She had invited him to view her private collection, a pretext they both understood. Hidden behind the shadow of a marble statue, away from the guards, he cornered her. He wasn't gentle. Young, hungry lips met hers, dry with age but shockingly eager. It was a collision. A passion 52 years apart. A scandal that would set New York ablaze. The time bomb under the table, the one marked by the Griffin brooch, was beginning to tick, and Genevieve, blinded by the touch of a man who had finally seen her soul, was about to light the fuse herself. New York nights became a labyrinth of desire and secrets. Genevieve's private art storage facility, a climate-controlled, maximum-security vault somewhere in Chelsea that smelled of linseed oil and centuries of canvas dust, became their sanctuary. There, far from the judgmental eyes of Fifth Avenue and the whispers of her daughters, Genevieve, the 77-year-old empress, allowed herself to surrender to the forbidden. Leo, his linen shirt invariably open at the collar, revealing the dark ink of a tattoo that snaked mysteriously across his chest, moved among the wooden boxes and wrapped paintings like a predator in its territory. He was a flesh-and-blood rebellion against her sterile sophistication, and she drank from his energy like an elixir. It was there, in the silence of the warehouse under the dim light of a single industrial bulb, that their alliance was sealed in the most intimate and transgressive way. On a whim, he began to sketch her. He didn't want her in her silks and diamonds. He wanted the truth beneath. He insisted the fluorescent light was too harsh, lighting candles that cast long, dancing shadows. He stripped her. First, he removed her jewelry, the sound of diamonds hitting the wooden table echoing in the silence. Then her clothes, and finally, her decades of defenses. He captured her in charcoal sketches, not the matriarch, but the woman, vulnerable, naked, her weather-beaten skin contrasting dramatically with the deep shadows. And when Genevieve saw the sketches, she saw herself for the first time in 50 years. Not the relic, not the widow, but a fierce lover, her skin flushed with caresses that defied the clock, her eyes glowing with a fire she thought was extinguished. "You make me feel," she whispered, her trembling fingers touching the rough paper, "as if time were a lie." He used this absolute vulnerability to reveal the next layer of his lie. "I was raised by a forger, Genevieve," he confessed, his voice low, filled with perfectly calibrated pain. "My entire life is a gallery of lies, of stolen identities. But you are my only true canvas." He then confessed his plan. He was seeking revenge against a cartel of collectors who, he claimed, had destroyed his adoptive father and stolen his family's inheritance, an inheritance he implied was somehow connected to the late Mr. Reed, and he needed it. Together they conspired. She, hungry for a purpose beyond charity dinners, hungry for the danger he posed, opened her coffers. She gave him access to her husband's secret ledgers, to those from stolen artworks to the secrets of the Reed Empire. He, in turn, used her information as a weapon, planting clues at rival exhibitions, whispering doubts in the right ears, destabilizing his enemies with surgical precision. But the outside world couldn't be kept at bay forever. Tensions boiled over a chilly lunch at the Modern with her daughter Claire. The air was thick with unspoken disapproval. "Mom," Claire finally hissed, her fork slicing through the foie gras with brutal precision. "That boy is an opportunist. He's my age. What are you thinking? He's using you." Genevieve smiled, a cold matriarchal smile she had perfected over the years, but her heart pounded. "He sees me, darling," she replied. But the warning was clear. Later that night, in her Chanel bag, she found a linen napkin from the restaurant, not her own. Scrawled in red lipstick were just 3 words: "Beware the Griffin." The bomb under the table was silently exploding. Someone was watching. The public climax came at the annual MoMA Gala. Genevieve entered, stunning in black satin, with Leo at her side. He was her defiant youth, and the light touch of his hand on the small of her back as they walked past the photographers was a silent scandal that everyone in the room noticed. "You are my muse, Genevieve," he whispered, his lips brushing dangerously against her earlobe. Her pulse quickened, not with love, but with a passion that smelled of danger, like fresh paint on a stolen canvas. The evening descended into chaos. A rival collector, pale with rage over a deal Leo had sabotaged, publicly confronted him near the bar. "You're a fraud," he shouted, enough to silence the atrium. You're a forger just like your father. Leo's reaction was savage, unbecoming of the sophisticated curator he pretended to be. Furious, he swept his arm and shattered a priceless Ming vase on a nearby pedestal. The shattered porcelain echoed through the silent room like a gunshot. Later in her apartment he broke down. The arrogance was gone, replaced by boyish tears. That was the moment of the first confession, the half-truth. They were right, he said, his voice breaking. I was hired by them, by your rivals. I was paid to seduce you, to steal your secrets. It was all revenge. He grabbed her, his fingers digging into her arms. But then you turned the project into love. I fell in love with you, Genevieve. I swear. And she, poisoned by betrayal but still desperately addicted to desire, believed him. The Upper East Side apartment was silent as a tomb. It was 2 a.m. Genevieve Reed was alone, the expensive scent of her own MoMA party still clinging to her hair, but the scent of failure was stronger. Leo's confession, I was hired to seduce you, but I fell in love with you, echoed in her ears. She wanted to believe him. The part of her that was 77 and dying of loneliness wanted to believe him. But the part of her that built an empire on the ashes of her husband's knew that confessions made under duress are rarely the whole truth. The anonymous note in her purse, scrawled in red lipstick on a napkin from the Modern, felt like it was burning a hole in her Chanel. Beware the Griffin. Her hands shaking, not from age, but from a cold, calculating fury. She went to the guest room. His room. It still smelled of him, an arrogant mix of expensive sandalwood, turpentine, and something that was purely youth. It was a scent that had addicted her, and now disgusted her. She felt like a complete fool. Where was it? He wouldn't take her most precious possession. She looked under the bed, behind the dresser, and finally, tucked between the mattress and the headboard, she found it. Not the hardcover notebook where he'd drawn her naked by candlelight. That one was for her, for seduction. This one was different. A cheap sketchbook bound in black leather, held together by a worn elastic band. His work journal, his hunting journal. She took it to her library, poured herself a brandy she wasn't supposed to drink, and opened it. The air left her lungs. The first pages were her, but not the muse he claimed to adore. They were analytical sketches, cold, cruel. Notes in the margins, not about her beauty but about her weaknesses. Responds to intellectual flattery. Touching a hand provokes a shock reaction. She likes it. Profound loneliness. Vulnerable to fabricated confidences. Distant daughters. Exploiting family abandonment. She wasn't a lover, she was a target. The I love you was the final bullet. She turned the pages with a growing nausea. Anger replaced desire, and then her sketching stopped. And the obsession began. Page after page, dozens of obsessive drawings of the Griffin brooch, detailed drawings of the Reed family crest, maps of her art vaults, and then the notes. These weren't curatorial notes. They were research notes. Names of lawyers who worked for the Reed Empire in the 1970s, and dates. One date, circled several times in red ink, with exclamation points. October 24th, 1973. Genevieve felt the blood drain from her face. The brandy glass slipped from her hand and shattered on the Persian rug, but she didn't notice. 1973. She was 25. She was in New York, madly in love with tycoon Andrew Reed, who was still married to his first wife at the time. The scandal that nearly destroyed everything before it even began. The secret they buried beneath 5 decades of wealth and power. She continued turning the pages, her hands now numb. And there it was. The name. St. Jude Clinic for Young Mothers. No, it couldn't be. It was the place. The clean, sterile, eerily quiet place where Andrew had sent her, where she'd signed the papers, where she'd been told the boy would go to a good family in California. Son she'd sacrificed on the altar of the Reed name, to secure her marriage, to cement the dynasty. Andrew's son. Her son. The sensuality. The touch of his warm skin against hers in the cafe. The kiss at the Met, behind the marble statue. The nights in the storage room. The way he looked at her while she was naked, and she mistook his intensity for desire, when in fact it was, what? Recognition? Hatred? She looked at the last drawing in the book. It was the Griffin. And below it, a single scrawled sentence: "What has been taken must be given back." Genevieve dropped the notebook as if it were covered in acid. The cold air of the apartment seemed to suffocate her. The revelation hit her with the force of a freight train. Their 52-year-old love wasn't just a social taboo. It was a tragedy. The ticking time bomb wasn't about money or art. It was about blood. The scandal she feared was an innocent farce compared to the truth she had just unearthed. The man she had taken as her lover was her son. "You figured it out, didn't you?" he growls. "You gave me life and killed me twice, Genevieve. First by abandoning me, then by loving me." The confrontation is visceral. It's not a conversation. It's a collision. Anger and desire, now poisoned by the truth, explode. Slaps that echo like gunshots. Kisses that bleed like fresh paint. A mixture of passion and revulsion. "I loved you," she screams, tears staining her silk. "At 25, I chose the name Reed over you. At 77, you made me love my own son without knowing it." The confession shatters her. The forbidden love, now revealed as incestuous, destroys her. But as vulnerability turns to fury, the matriarch is reborn. Genevieve, the lioness, reveals her final move. Secretly, she was recording everything. Her fingers were firmly on her hidden smartphone. The bombshell explodes for the public, but in a way no one expected. Leo crumbles, no longer the predator but the lost boy, begging for forgiveness. Love was the bait, but truth was the hook. At 77, Genevieve Reed is no longer a victim. She is the architect, transforming pain into a plan of redemption that New York will never forget. What about you? What would you do for a love that unearths your darkest secrets? Has this web of desire and revelation captivated you? Follow the channel for more truths that become addictions. Love doesn't age, it only deepens.